Hello, retro fans. Today is the 10th anniversary of the death of Jack Tramiel, which sounds a bit strange. In Germany, we say Todestag. It sounds a little bit more, well, I don't know, famous or something like this. But anyway, and and this episode is not going to be about talking about so many details about the life of Jack Tramiel. No, I'm looking at something different because, well, my main real life job is continuous improvement, and therefore I have a certain, well, sense or a certain passion for reducing production costs. And this is some sort of a similarity I share with Jack Tramiel because he was always very passionate and very, let's say, paying a lot of attention to the details to reduce production costs even further. And maybe just as some sort of a little background, he started as somebody stepping out of the army and repairing machines like typewriters or something like this. And he started his own business based on importing and selling typewriters, as well as later the lower cost segment of pocket calculators, so to say. And then he stepped into this computer business by buying MOS technology, so to say. And this was initially this was basically the start of all those famous machines like the PET and VC20 and, well, the C64. And the main focus of this episode is going to be about the C64 and how it has developed over the years, driven by cost reduction, so to say, and indeed to make it a bit more reliable, a bit more easy to produce. And well, that's actually going to be the main topic. Then, well, let's head into this and let's get started. So, and basically, as kind of usual, we start with a view on my desk, which is actually empty, but that's going to change because what I was looking at was basically the development of C64 versions over the years. And to begin with this, I have to, well, rewind the tape of history even a little bit further, but it is a sort of an oxymoron right now because this is the newest board I have for the C64, and this is actually a KU replica, and I'm going to show you this because this was basically the first commercial version of the C64 board. And as we can see with all those white sort of boxes with a little notch on the top, it has been very populated with parts. So it was very intense to produce, and therefore we had a lot of chances for failures as well. And since this isn't looking as impressive as a populated board, I have picked this as the very first one. And as we can see, we have really a lot of parts on this board. We got the main ICs on the top rows, so the CIAs, the in-output, integrated circuits, and then we got the different ROMs. And then we got indeed the CPU itself, basically. And then we got the PLA and the SID, which is actually missing here on this board. And then we got the very famous VIC-2 IC as, let's say, the main, well, workhorses on this board. and they are accompanied by a lot of additional ICs, mostly RAM, random access memory ICs here, some logic ICs, and here we have some timing ICs as well. And usually this is a modified board as well. This is not an original modulator. Usually here is the place for the TV modulator, the RF modulator, and this has been a very busy PCB as well. We may have a look at the original one a little bit later. Let's see. And yeah, I mean, the right part of the board is basically a lot about power conversion, voltage conversion, and the I/O ports, and that's basically all we have on this board. And what we can see here is that we have a lot of single components in terms of resistors as well as rectifiers and all that things. And this is actually going to change later on. And one of the famous quotes of Jack Tramiel is that he has said, "We have to build computer for the masses, not the classes." And he was pretty aware about the mass market. And I mean, coming from typewriters and calculators and all that things, he knew that even with machines where you just have a small margin, if you just sell enough of them, then you're going to make a lot of money as well. So he was quite on the opposite spectrum of this whole computer scene compared to Apple, for example, or something like this. And yeah, I think his approach was actually working quite well, and owning MOS as the main contributor of ICs for the C64 was actually very, very helpful as well. And this has put this whole C64 design through a couple of revisions over the years. And as I said, this is actually the 407 board. This is the one that followed the KU board, and this has been in production for, I think, about 3 to 4 years. So I think sometimes in the mid 1985 range, something like this, the last boards of this revision have been produced. And this is actually followed by the next one I'm going to show you right now. And this is the 425 board, and I shouldn't have placed this too far away because we may compare this a little bit to each other. And on the first glance they look quite similar, but if you pay a little bit more attention to the detail, you can see that especially the VIC area has been sort of decrowded a lot. So as you can see, we have 4 ICs on the 406 board. Just move this a little bit into view. Whereas on the 425 board, we just have the 8701 clock timing divider something chip. It's pretty multifunctional and very important for, well, this whole system, because the VIC is responsible for the RAM X refresh as well. So therefore it has to interact a lot with this part as well. And as you can see, the main section has remained almost the same. So we got the 2 CIAs, we got the main ROMs, we got the CPU, which has changed to the 8500 already on this board revision. And then we got the PLA and the SID, which is missing here. And this whole area about this voltage regulator thing looks almost the same. So they just got rid of a small part over here, which has been integrated, and then actually it is almost comparable to this. And here we have an original TV modulator on it, and I think we should be able to open it if if it is not soldered. Let's see if it is going to play. Looks like we opened. Ah, it's soldered on top. So, but here we can have a look at the more or less famous TV modulator, which is actually a very, very simple PCB compared to the main board, so to say. And this has changed over the years a lot as well. And this is actually the, well, I think #1 part I change usually on C64 boards because the quality is often not very good. And it produces a lot of interference on the board as well, especially in the sound area, so to say. And yep, there are much better solutions, and therefore this is actually one thing I replace on almost all the 64s I'm putting my hands on, so to say. Yep, so, and this is actually the second version of the so-called long boards. For me, this term is a little bit odd because I associate long with something like this, a long thing. So for me, this is either narrow or wide, or is it deep or shallow, or whatever what we want to call this. But well, the most common term is that this is a long board. And this has been followed by the so-called 466 board, which looks actually like this. And here we can see that some things has started to change already, and especially the RAM area has been sort of combined into just some few ICs. So, and the arrangement of the main ICs has remained almost the same. So actually this is still the PLA position, this is the SID position. Here we got the VIC, VIC 2, and here the 8701 IC. So the VIC area remained almost the same. But interestingly, some changes to the circuit design make the 466 board the board with one of the best TV output quality, whatever we want to call this. And therefore this is actually something a lot of people are looking for because, well, of the picture quality. And as we can see, the modulator is basically almost the same. So, I mean, we can try to open this as well, but I think that's probably not soldered. Okay. So, it isn't looking that much different, and it may has a few components replaced for maybe a little bit better version or something like this, but actually it is not really groundbreaking differently. And yep, so this is actually the last version of the so-called Longbirds. And interestingly, Commodore had no real fade in, fade out of product life cycle or something like this. So they started to produce one sort of boards in one area of the world. Then they started to work on another version, started to produce this, kept the other one running. And therefore there are some overlapping time periods, so to say. And as we can see, it's now on 1984, here it's 1986, and the very first one is 1983. But this is actually just the version when this version has been released, and not the last day of production or something like this. And as you are probably familiar with the different cases of the C64, we got this bread bin case, and we got this flat style case. And from the outside, it is really hard to say which board is in which case, so to say, because, as I said, Commodore kept producing even older board revisions for a while, and they sort of came back to the bread bin case later on. So you can find bread bin cases with short boards, as well as you can find flat style case version 2 C64s with long boards as well. And one famous example is actually one I have here right now, but we can step into this a little bit briefly. So this is actually the flat style, it's huge, the flat style version of the C64. And this is probably containing a longboard as well, as heavy as it feels. It's actually a little bit hard to see, but I'm pretty sure it is going to be a longboard. And there is one special occurrence, so to say. If you find a flat case, a case version 2, something like this, with a keyboard that looks like this, then it is very likely that you get a C64 with a 466 board, because this is actually the original keyboard style of the C64, with all the Petsky characters printed on the front of the keys, so to say, not on the top. But this requires that you have to go through 2 cycles of printing the keys. And this was actually another step to reduce costs. They moved the Petsky characters on top of the keys, so they just had 1 print cycle and then you are done with the production of the keyboard, which actually saves a lot of money. So, and therefore we see these 2 versions of keyboards. The older bread bin cases almost come with the old style keyboard, but the so-called C64G, which has produced a lot of it in Germany, is actually a bread bin version with this white style keyboard and the Petsky characters on top. So there's a mix of keyboards as well, but that's a very interesting detail that they have changed the production of the keyboards as well. And you can see this on the function keys too. They have printed the second function key function on top of the keys as well. So yep, so much about cases. And well, since we talk about cases already, there are even different versions of this flat style case. Most of the cases, they come with screws, as we can see here, with 3 of them. And the later versions of these keyboards, we are getting rid of those screws as well, and they have just some small little parts that just click into each other, and therefore they saved even the screws. So it is really interesting to see that you can pay attention to so many small details and even improve production further, so to say. Yep, and as mentioned already, the 466 was actually the last version of the longboards, which means that there is actually coming a short version as well. And here we got one. This is not the earliest version of the short boards, but this is one of the earlier ones, so to say. It's already revision 4. And as you can see, it is indeed shorter, or not as that, or whatever we want to call this anyway. And the major difference is that we have a huge reduction of parts here as well. And I mean, the main ICs, they're still there. So we got the CRs, which are here and here. They are missing. We got the ROMs, we got the CPU, we got the VIC, and actually we got a SID usually here. But the other ICs, especially the PLA, has been combined to the so-called Super PLA, and therefore a lot of the other logic ICs are reduced as well. And there's actually one thing that it's sort of, well, obvious. Most of those single components resistors have been combined to those resistor strips, whatever we want to call this. And this has basically shortened the time to populate the boards before welding as well. And actually it reduces the amount of parts that may break down or, well, misplaced or something like this too. And here we can see that the TV modulator has been reduced in size as well. This is pretty heavily soldered. Probably not going to. Oh yes, it is. It has been opened already, and they look quite the same. So they just kind of squeezed everything a little bit together. But actually they look almost the same internally, and from a circuit design they are very similar as well. But you have to keep in mind they are not interchangeable because the pin layout is a little bit different, and usually they working with lower voltage than the older ones, and therefore you have to pay attention to this. And yep, as I said, this is actually the one version of the short board, and there's indeed another version of the short board as well. And as you can see, this is quite modified as well. So I've changed the TV modulator, and I have replaced the SID with the SID kick, so to say. But what I want to show you is actually that there are two versions of this Super PLA, because here we got the color RAM as an external IC, and on this board revision the color RAM is integrated into the Super PLA. And therefore, if you're going to repair a board, a short board, and you suggest that this Super PLA is probably broken, and you're going to replace this, then you really have to pay attention that you get the right version, because they are not going to work on the wrong board, so to say. And this was actually the last attempt to shrink things down a little bit, and maybe the C64 game system, the C64 GS, has been the most dramatic step in cost cutting. So they reduced, they removed the keyboard, for example, and they changed the expansion port to an up pointing position, so to say. And the real thing is actually that a lot of cartridge games produced for the game systems are actually made for the old SID, for the 6581. But the game system is using a newer board with the 8580 SID chip, and therefore a couple of games are sounding a bit strange on the game system. And well, it hasn't sold very good. So, and it wasn't really cheap. So Commodore really tried to step into the cartridge market and make some money there by delivering less for even more money. So this hasn't worked out pretty well. So yeah, and this is actually a short excursus into the world of Jack Tramiel's cost-cutting philosophy. And there are some other quotes which I don't have in mind. I couldn't find a one-to-one writing on the internet, so that he was really paying attention to single pence of parts, for example, because he was saying that if we save one cent or 1 pence in a part and going to use this a million times, then we have saved a million pence, which sounds actually quite logical. And yeah, that's actually what I had in mind for this episode. And as a very last thing, I will have a look at the CSDB and what we can find as some sort of memorial demos for the C64, just to round this up a little bit, and let's see what's there. So I've set up my C64 with the WIC64 Wi-Fi modem, because we're going to browse the CSDB database. And let's have a look what I have found already. As we can see, there are a couple of releases, so let's just jump into the first one and see whether we are able to load this. Yep. Unfortunately, there is no picture. Let's see if we can load the program. Okay. Not so impressive, but well. Let's see what we can find next. Unfortunately, we can't jump back. That would be a very cool feature. But fortunately, the WIC64 remembers sort of where we have been. But we still have to jump back into the query. Let's go for the next one. They are actually pretty old, interestingly. Here we got a picture. Let's have a look at the picture. Computers for the masses, not the classes. Yeah, indeed. Okay, that's a preview picture. Let's see if we can load the release itself. Run. Yep. Which is actually the picture, but in a bit better quality, so to say. But yeah, nice digitized photography, and the famous quote. So yeah, I can't get out of this, so that's a bit... Just have to reset this. So notch, hurry, notch. Another graphics. So this time we jump directly to the program. Let's skip the picture, which is obviously going to be the same as well. So unfortunately, this one won't load, but that's exactly the one I want to show you. So I downloaded this on my USB stick, and we load this from here. I got even music. Cool. As you can see, it's a Petsky graphic, and it, well, resembles Jack Tramiel quite well, so to say. As good as it is possible with Petsky graphics. But it is indeed a weird thing because it's a single PRG, so it should be downloaded and started quite easily by the WIC, so that's probably something the developer may have to look into what's going to be an issue, but as you can see it is actually loaded from USB stick quite easily. And the interesting thing is that this is actually released by Thunder. Look, Thunder Focus, and you can buy this as a t-shirt, for example, at thunderfocus.nl/shop if you're interested into having something like this. And this is, well, actually the end of this episode. It's a little bit shorter than usually, but it was just that I like to go through the different board revisions quite briefly, because this came to my mind as I read the 10th anniversary tweet, so to say. And then, well, yeah, as usual, thanks a lot for watching, and feel free to hit that like button, this thumbs up button, hit this subscribe button, or join the channel membership, or support me on Patreon. Whatever you feel comfortable doing, and well, see you for the next episode. Bye bye.